Statistics Canada says the jobless rate in this country remained unchanged in July at 6.4%. But that latest data shows a job market with some downsides. Anis Hidari explains.
Just 2,800 fewer jobs nationally in July. A drop so low it counts as a 0.0% change. Job gains in the public sector or in warehousing and transportation were canceled out. The drops in retail work or categories like finance and insurance.
We don't see a lot of job creation in Canada anymore. And one reason cited by businesses as to why they don't think that their situation is in a good shape is high interest rates.
There are hints the Bank of Canada is worried about a weak job market. And even before today's numbers, economists were predicting interest rate cuts.
We're really looking at the fundamentals. We think that going forward, the Bank of Canada will reduce rates because there has been weakness in the labor market and across the broader Canadian economy.
A weak job market is also not affecting everyone equally.
And we're starting to see a broadening in the unemployment rate pressure from the youth population, but also recent immigrants are also seeing higher unemployment.
With the unemployment rate going up for both young people and recent immigrants, despite remaining unchanged for Canada overall, economists are also pointing out it will take more than just a change in interest rates to change employment issues. Anis Hidari, CBC News, Calgary.
Well, to dig a little deeper into these numbers, we are joined by Jason Murray. He is the president and managing partner at BIPOC Executive Search. Jason, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Jacqueline.
So, I mean, you specialize in the executive search level, but you've got your finger on the pulse of the broader job market as well. And I wonder what you're seeing in terms of the supply of jobs out there right now and the demand.
Yes, you know, there is definitely a lot going on in the job market right now. A lot of it has to do with the overall economy. It's been a rough year for a lot of sectors and industries. I know that much of this segment is really focusing on the younger population and some of the challenges that they're having at this time in the workforce. And some of that has to do with the fact that at this time of the year, there are obviously some industries like retail and hospitality that will typically hire people from the younger generation. But because some industries are still really taking a hit this year, they can't necessarily add to their headcount like they have been able to in past years. So there's a confluence of activity happening right now, but it's a very active market in many different ways you haven't seen before.
Yeah, when we talk about the unemployment rate, overall it's at 6.4%, but for youth, 14.2%, the highest it's been in over a decade when you're not counting the pandemic time when everything really got skewed. So it really comes down to the economy and how these business owners are feeling the uncertainty kind of hanging over everyone?
Well, that is one thing, but I'd say there's probably two other things to point out. One is that we're actually seeing a number of people who are older than these younger generations accepting some of the jobs that younger people would typically be in. That really is telling about how difficult it is right now for a number of people. The fact that they're willing to take less pay and perhaps do something that they would have done 15, 20 years ago at this moment in time. There are people staying in the workforce longer and not retiring, wanting to make sure that they're still active and participating and contributing to the economy. There's also technology. We know that the world iteratively changes, and technology right now is keeping us on our toes. So many employers are finding efficiencies and saying we do not need to hire as much because technology is able to actually fill in that people gap.
And in a way, I mean, that is encouraging on the technology side because we want to hear about productivity increases in this country because it's such a challenge. But I mean, that when you're talking about the older generation still working or, you know, taking some of those lower paid jobs, a reflection perhaps of the cost of living and just the challenges that so many people are facing right now. I want to highlight another number that Anis talked about in his report too, and it comes down to the challenge for recent immigrants to this country. So when you're looking at the unemployment rate for recent immigrants, 12.6%. Yeah. And for youth who are recent immigrants, 22.8%. These are big numbers. So what makes the challenge that much greater, do you think, for that category?
It's so interesting that you're bringing up this question. I just this week gave a talk to a college, and this classroom actually has a number of newcomers and immigrants. And some of the challenges that they were bringing up has to do with, one, language. So while they're proficient in English, it may not necessarily be with the same level of articulation as people who may be native to Canada, where English is their first language. Another thing is Canadians, in terms of the industries and sectors, aren't always looking at the experience that people have had abroad as being equivalent with what they're looking for when they're looking at people's applications and really wanting to make sure that these individuals can handle the responsibilities that would be under their purview. But my ask and my plea of the wider economy is to really make sure you're thinking expansively. There's so many possibilities and so many ways that you can grow your own organization and company by bringing in some of these new voices that you're saying perhaps we wouldn't because they're newcomers to the country.
So if for somebody, I mean, maybe they're a newcomer to the country, maybe they're not, and they either want to get a new job right now. I mean, sometimes people just want to change. Yeah. I don't know if you'd recommend that right now in this economy, but maybe that just is the case. Life happens, yeah. Or they have to find a new job right now. What would be your advice for people to be able to stand out in this job market right now?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question as well. I would say that it's so important for people to actually have an online presence. I can't stress enough that this world is looking more and more in terms of how people show up online. So if you're someone who doesn't have an updated LinkedIn, or if you're someone who doesn't actually have any other footprint online, you really want to think about what that means to you. Developing your personal brand is something that people are looking for more and more, so that they can say that people are standing out. Also, while technology is great, as we just said, yeah. There's some drawbacks to it. And one of the biggest drawbacks is that people are spending so much time trying to network online, trying to make sure that they actually are having these conversations online, but people have to get out. They have to actually be in forums and in spaces where there are other people, where they're able to network by handshaking, by reading body language, and by having meaningful conversations in the moment, as opposed to that period where there's no conversation because you're waiting for a reply.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and that also, do you just apply for jobs through postings, or do you try to reach out to somebody at that company through LinkedIn or something along those lines to actually make that personal connection? I don't know. Is that too pushy for some people, or is that exactly what you should be doing?
That's exactly what you should be doing.
Okay.
So obviously it's good to see what is being posted in the public domain, right? Those sites are there for a reason, so that they can really make sure that people in the marketplace actually see that the organization's bellowing a message. We have a vacancy. We're hoping that you're the person. Please come and apply. But there's something about intentionality that a lot of people really enjoy, even from like that primitive psychological piece. So people actually give a very meaningful email to someone and they say, you know what, you might not even be hiring now, but I'm willing to actually even do a contract. Maybe there's a project that you actually have where you need someone who has the skill sets that I do. I would love to be able to come in, even if it's a temporary work situation, even an internship, something that creates an entry point so that you're actually there and you're able to show your skills. And by the time you actually develop a relationship, because we know so much of this networking is about relationship building, people often want to find a way to continue to invest in you and have you be a part of their team long term.
That could be particularly good advice for the youth as well here, Jason. We'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for your insights. Really appreciate it.
Yes, always a pleasure.
That's Jason Murray. He's president and managing partner at BIPOC Executive Search, a recruitment agency here in Toronto.